We have each been given an amazing ability to focus our attention on any one of the many different mental levels in our life. A lot of people go through life never realizing there are levels in the mind and that you can move up and down between those levels. We pay a high price for not knowing this. For example, every negative emotion depends on my being in the lowest level. As soon as I get out of the lowest level, that negative emotion loses its power. That is one reason people are unaware of the higher levels. It is as if the negative emotion has an investment in you being asleep or unaware of something else you can access. It wants control. So imagine you are terrified of some situation and are caught up in imagining, well, what if this or what if that? And the world is going to come to an end. These thoughts all support the whirlwind of the negative emotion in the basement. But if you move up just a little higher and look at things from that point of view, you would see how unfounded those fears are and how much they depend on an illusion. You might gain a different perspective that makes a huge difference to your spiritual life. Imagine being on top of a mountain and you're able to look down upon the valley down below, and you can see this vast valley below, mountains across the way, and there's, say, 500,000 people living in that valley. There are people going to work, there are people coming home from work, there are people who are upset because the traffic light has turned red, there are people who are just involved in an accident, there are people in the hospital, people in the emergency room. There are people being born and people dying. There are people making love and people making war. There are people who are terrified and there are people who are peaceful. But what do you actually see from the mountaintop? You see a beautiful place of peace and perfect harmony. Everything is beautiful and as it should be, right? From God's point of view, the world is going along fine. But the closer you get to the level on which people live, the more you get caught up in the little things like the way we live and die over traffic, for example, as if they matter in the grander scheme of things. Or it's like a father watching his child play at the beach. The child builds a sandcastle and then the waves come in and destroy the castle. The child's world comes to an end. Does the father cry? No. He smiles because he has a higher vantage point and sees this little event as part of a grander picture. He doesn't get caught up in that small picture. In any situation, we can access the higher level and view the circumstance differently. I've known people who do this as they go in for surgery. You might think, this is terrible. They're about to go under the knife and their heart might stop during the operation. Something else terrible might happen. Yet you find the patient in a very peaceful state. I think sometimes we are given the ability to access our peaceful levels at the very moment when we need peace most. Sometimes people going into battle get into a state of peace. We can get caught up in the illusion that we must be upset because of the situation, but the situation doesn't cause the upset. What causes the upset is that we are stuck in the basement, and we need to get to a higher level to be able to interpret the situation properly. Viewing our situation from the highest level enables us to see our life as far out as eternity. 5 minutes or 5 years or 100 years are as nothing compared to eternity. So if you are really upset about something, just access the higher level and think, I wonder how this looks in relation to my eternal welfare. Frank Rose, the author of this material, tells a story of waiting for a group of people to come to his small group that he wanted to lead. And he writes, while I was waiting for the group's meeting to begin, I found myself standing outside, wanting cars to come into the parking lot. And then I thought, this is crazy. I want to go to a higher level. On the higher level, You can see all the cars. They have already left home. The people are in the cars. They're converging on this place. Because I had not seen that, I had the emotion going, are they coming or aren't they? I was very anxious. But it was already in the cards, wasn't it? So the emotion depends on me having a limited point of view. I can make up stuff to be upset about. The ego always likes to be upset. So that was Frank's real life experience. There are other things we can achieve by raising the mind. One of them is to see more deeply and understand things that are otherwise an enigma. Have you ever had the thought that disagreements between people depend on a failure to understand the other person's point of view? And that if you really understood another person, you could agree with them? How can you understand another person's point of view? Well, you must rise to a higher level and be willing to look at it from a more universal plane or perspective. So the task of raising your mind is a spiritual discipline that you're being invited to experience. At least once a day, practice raising your mind to a higher level, rising above anger and fear, and so forth, seeing another person from an angelic point of view, or seeing an event or circumstance in your life in relation to your eternal life story.